Are you sick of living in the city? Want to find a rural town and get a mortgage on some country real estate? Who doesn't, right? Today we're looking at great rural towns in Minnesota. This is like the 10th or 12th in this series, where we do a little research on the state and find out their best rural towns and where you'd want to move. A few things about rural Minnesota towns. They rarely have jobs, so you have to bring one, or not need one, like most states. And the weather can be challenging, like very challenging. Now, we're not going to get into the weather on every single one. Let's just assume they have very cold winters and their summers are kind of pleasant. Give you an example. Warm season lasts about 3.5 months from late May, mid-September, with an average daily temperature around 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, here's where the challenging part comes in. The cold season lasts for about 3.5 months, from late November to about early to mid-March, with an average daily high of about 36 degrees Fahrenheit. The coldest month of the year in Minneapolis is January, with an average low of 10 degrees Fahrenheit and a high of 24 degrees. If you haven't watched this series before, what we're looking for is that sweet spot. A decent place to live that isn't too close to any major cities, it's easy on the crime rate, not 5 hours away from a hospital, or so far out in the sticks you get horrible internet. Those things knock a lot of small towns off the list. Now, in past videos we brought up the internet speeds in every single town. What I've done is just kind of eliminate that and not included any towns that have under 100 Mbps. Like I've said before, not all states have 10 good rural towns, and I don't want to waste your time with some places that are a bit of a reach just to get up to 10, so we're going with what we could find. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 7, Crookston, Minnesota. Crookston sits in the northwest section of Minnesota near the North Dakota border. The nearest city would be Grand Forks, North Dakota, about 35 minutes northwest of Crookston. And it's also 20 minutes north of Climax, Minnesota. Oh yeah. Present-day Crookston first saw settlements by non-Indian people around 1872. These days, it's home to the University of Minnesota at Crookston and has the Red Lake River flowing right through town. They get a thumbs up for their crime rate because they enjoy a crime rate that is 29% lower than the national average. Healthcare here is not a worry. They've got the Riverview Health, which has an ER and everything you need. Anything past that, you're going to have to go to Fargo or Grand Forks. Real estate also gets a big thumbs up here. They have nice homes that start off around $200,000, and really nice homes start off around $300,000, work their way up to about $500,000. This is a great town to raise a family, and a great town if you like the outdoors. They got plenty of it around you, and they got good fishing. I don't know if you can fish for muskie around here, but whenever I talk about Minnesota fishing, I remember a guy saying that there's been more than one fist fights on the docks because of a muskie exaggeration. Number 6, Hutchinson, Minnesota. Hutchinson is a rural town about an hour west of Minneapolis. It's almost too big for this list with a population of 13,000, but it's definitely rural. There's not much around it but farmland and trees. The closest big city is Minneapolis. I include bigger rural towns because not everyone wants to live in a tiny rural town of 200 people. Some people want to find a rural town that's just away from the big city. This one fits that bill. The Hutchinson family singers, which were a big deal back in the late early 1900s, are credited with founding the town in November of 1855. The post office has been in operation in Hutchinson since 1856, and the city was incorporated in 1904. Hutchinson sits on Otter Lake and the South Fork of the Crow River, which flows right through downtown. If you want to live in the middle of Minnesota, this is probably a good choice. They get a thumbs up for their crime rate, which is 30% lower than the national average. They also get a thumbs up when it comes to their health care. They have Hutchinson Health Hospital, which has an emergency room, urgent care, and just about everything you're going to need. Anything beyond that, you're going to have to go to Minneapolis. And they got other doctors and dentists around town too. So that's the benefit of having a town of 13,000 people. Your healthcare issues are not really much of a worry. If you want to buy a house, they get a thumbs up for that also. You can get decent homes here for around $150,000. Nice homes start off around $200,000, with really nice ones getting into about $350,000 on up. They do have some $1 million homes here. Obviously, they're going to be down by the river and they're going to be really nice. But they have some on the outskirts of town. If you really want to live rural, you can get anywhere from 2 to 5 acres for around $400,000. Not bad. Number 5, Long Prairie, Minnesota. Long Prairie sits on the Long Prairie River about an hour northwest of St. Cloud, Minnesota. The history of this area dates back to the time when the land was inhabited first by the Sioux. In 1845, the U.S. government selected the location known as Long Prairie now as a site for a U.S. Indian agency. In the 1830s, white settlers claimed and began developing the land around what is now Long Prairie. Long Prairie these days has about 1,200 residents, and they get a thumbs up for their crime rate. It is 39% lower than the national average. Not bad. If you like golfing and you like fishing, this is a solid place to live. Of course, like we said earlier, the winters might limit when you can hit the links. When it comes to healthcare, they get a big thumbs up because they had Center Care Long Prairie, which was a care center, had all the things you need, and that was an older building. Back a few years ago, they built a new area, which is a lot bigger and a lot nicer. Brand new facilities, emergency room, all the good stuff you're going to need. They even have a mental health center here. You want to put down roots and buy some real estate in Long Prairie? They get a thumbs up for that also. $140,000 is probably where you're going to start looking for a decent home. They do have some cheaper, but they're probably going to need a little work. But $140,000 should get you into something that's relatively new and in decent shape. If you want something really nice, you're looking at around $300,000, $350,000. Now, I know there are some parts of the country where $350,000 makes you spit out your sweet tea, but if you're coming from someplace like New York City, anywhere in California, Oregon for that matter, you're thinking that's pretty cheap. If you're living in San Francisco, you probably have enough to buy a home here in your checking account. Not a bad Minnesota town though. Number 4, Granite Falls, Minnesota. Granite Falls was platted in 1872. The city was named for deposits of granite rock in the area. Their high school baseball, football team, whatever, their mascot is the Kilowatts. You know, probably about 4 years ago, I did a video on the worst high school mascot names. I don't know how I missed this one. The Kilowatts? This is their frickin' logo. Granite Falls is about 2 hours west of Minneapolis on the Minnesota River, and they have a hydroelectric plant there, which is where they got the name for the high school mascot. Granite Falls has a population of about 2,500 residents, and they get a thumbs up for their crime rate. It's 44% below the national average. If you're looking for healthcare here, you don't have to worry about it. They got a decent-sized hospital with emergency room and everything you need. And along with that, they got dentists and doctors scattered throughout the town. If you decide you want to buy a home here, they get a thumbs up for that too. They've got quite a few places for just about every price range, starting off around $70,000 for something that's going to need some work, all the way up to $400,000. Realistically though, you should be expecting to pay about $250,000 for something decent. And that's all in town. If you want to get in the outskirts of town, it goes a little bit cheaper and you usually get an acre or two. And they've got plenty of lots for sale right now, starting off at $1,400 for like a quarter of an acre. Number 3, Bagley, Minnesota. Bagley was settled in the late 1800s, and it was named for Summer C. Bagley, a local lumberman. Bagley is about 2 hours northeast of Fargo on the Clearwater River. Interesting fact about Bagley, on February 13th, 1996, the Bagley varsity hockey team played their last outdoor hockey game. They were the last Minnesota State High School League program to play outdoors. Bagley has a golf course and some decent schools. Bagley has a population of about 1,500 residents, and they get a thumbs up for their crime rate, which is 45% lower than the national average. They also get a thumbs up for healthcare. They got Sanford Bagley Medical Center, which is a pretty good sized place for such a small town. They have emergency room, all that other good stuff. On their website, they make a point to let you know that they have all the stuff you need for your mammogram, and early detection is key. We've lost far too many moms, grandmas, sisters, and wives to breast cancer, so that's always important. Bagley also gets a thumbs up for their home prices. Their real estate is not bad. They've got some vacant lots like on the lake or pond or whatever that are about 8 acres for $54,000. They got another one that's a little outside of town that's a bunch of acres, 25 for $39,000. So they've got a lot of land for sale, but if you start looking at the houses, a decent house starts off a little over $100,000. But realistically, $200,000 should get you something really nice. They got one in here, 5 bedrooms for $400,000 that if I lived in the area, I'd buy it. It's got that whole cabin vibe. I love that. Bagley is definitely a cold place. It's towards the upper part of Minnesota where it gets really cold. Number 2, Marshall, Minnesota. Back to one that's probably close to being a little too big for this list, you got Marshall, Minnesota. Marshall, Minnesota is really a rural town. If you look at the place from the satellite view, it is surrounded by miles and miles of farmland. Marshall sits about 3 hours west of Minneapolis and about an hour and a half north of Sioux Falls, North Dakota. I love Sioux Falls. It's one of my favorite North Dakota towns. Just kidding, it's in South Dakota. Come on, be honest. How many were typing out their comment? I like Sioux Falls though. It's not a bad place to hang out. But Marshall is a good sized small town out in the middle of the prairie. They got a golf course. They sit right on the Redwood River, which isn't terribly big. It's a glorified creek, but you can still do some fishing there. Golf, fishing. What more could you want, besides a little more sunshine so you could do both of those things? Marshall was platted in 1872 when the railroad extended to this point, and it's home of the Southwest Minnesota State University. If you want to be one of the 13,000 people that live here, you get to enjoy a nice crime rate. They get a thumbs up for their crime rate. It's 56% lower than the national average. They also get a thumbs up for their healthcare. They got a pretty good sized place, a Vera Marshall Regional Medical Center, emergency room. They've got a kidney institute, everything you're going to need, you're going to find here. You got a pretty cool water tower sitting right out front also. And it's not just the hospital. Like a lot of these small towns, they have a lot of doctors' offices, a whole bunch of them clumped together to the east of the medical center. When it comes to real estate, they're getting a faded thumbs up, and there's one reason for this. I think they're a little more expensive than they should be. This is out in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota. It's a good sized town, yes, but they're looking $340 for duplexes. I mean, one side of a duplex. They got new housing areas where they're selling lots and then you got to put the house on there, and those are going for $40,000. If you want something decent, you're probably looking at about $280,000 to $320,000, and they go all the way up. A lot of the nicer homes are around $500,000, $480,000, $520,000, somewhere in there. Other than that, this is not a bad place to live. All right, before we get to number one, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There's a link down below. Head on over there and give some videos a big thumbs up, and do it for this one too. All right, on to number one. And number one, Goodhue, Minnesota. Goodhue, Minnesota is southeast of Minneapolis, about 20 minutes south of Red Wing, Minnesota, and the Mississippi River. This is a small rural community of just 1,200 residents. This town is surrounded by farmland and grain silos. This town reminds me of one of those places where, older gentlemen go down to the hardware store pretty much just to talk to someone, which is great. That's kind of an American pastime. These days, the younger people, they do the same thing, but they go to coffee places. If you like cold weather and snow, this is a good place to live. They get quite a lot of it. Like I said, they got 1,200 residents and they get a big thumbs up for their crime rate. It's 86% lower than the national average. Outstanding, Goodhue. When it comes to healthcare, they're gonna get a faded thumbs up. They have a chiropractor in town. That's all I could find, and anything you're gonna need past that, you're just gonna have to head up to Red Wing, which is, like I said, 20 minutes away. But I'll tell you what, if you pinch a nerve in your neck, you're covered in Goodhue. Speaking of that, I gotta make an appointment with my chiropractor. If you want to buy a home here, they're going to get a thumbs up. They have a lot of lots for sale, like we just talked about in Marshall, and they range from $38,000 to $45,000. If you want to buy a home, they have a few for sale, but starting money you're going to need is about $225,000, and that looks decent. Everything else is up from there to $69,000 and $320,000. So they got some options and they're not crazy expensive. I'm looking at what has sold in the last 5 months, and most things go for around $225,000, $250,000. You do find some nice ones occasionally, it looks like, for under $200,000, so that's good. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a productive day, and be nice to each other.